And Brother Wayne brought a couple visitors with him, and so thank y'all for being here this morning. If you have your Bible, we'll start in Matthew chapter number 28. But I'm gonna have to do some work here to get us started. So for those of you who've been here in the class, and actually I mentioned it last week, and I never actually made it to really getting to fully discuss the women. We started talking about them, the women who were at the cross and the women who watched Jesus be buried, but we never actually made it to the resurrection fully last week. And so anyway, we're gonna read these passages, and when we read these passages, which y'all have known that we've been doing that as we've worked our way through this, we just read all four Gospels. And Bub told me he said he actually liked that I did it that way, and it helped him because I've been reading all four passages. When you read these four passages right here, it will get a little bit confusing. I'll be honest with you. When you read them, it gets a little confusing. And I'm going to try to explain. I'm going to try to make it easier. So as you read them, you're going to read them and you're going to be like, oh, okay, now I get it, aha, And so I want us to think about that, because as we go through these, you're going to see that Mary Magdalene is mentioned in every single gospel. Mary Magdalene is mentioned. But in my opinion, Mary Magdalene is really only important in John's gospel as far as what's going on at the time. So as you read these things, if you read them and think, okay, Mary Magdalene was here at this time, then it won't make sense. It won't line up. But if you read them with the understanding of that they're talking about these people, and I think God had the writers put Mary Magdalene in each one of these Gospels as a tribute to her, and as a tribute, for her, which we understand. We understand that Mary Magdalene was the first to see Jesus after he resurrected. But understand that as you're reading these things, that they're more than just Mary Magdalene and Mary the mother of James and Salome, which we know from our previous study from last week that is John and James' mom. And then there's also going to be Joanna. So when you read the different Gospels, you're going to see different things. And like I said, I believe I said it last week. But as we studied in our previous study, sometimes just like the thief on the cross, you study the thief on the cross and you read Matthew and Mark, and it just looks like they both just railed on Jesus, and that was it. But then you get to Luke and you're like, oh, wait a second. Like, there's a whole conversation that Jesus had with the thief on the cross, and he has this conversation, and he says, today you're going to be with me in paradise. And I believe John doesn't even bring him up at all. And so as you read them, you have to read with the understanding that each of these are given a little bit different perspective. Each of these are giving a little bit different account, even though it's the same account. It's going to be just a little, just different perspectives. And so as we study these things, just like when Jesus was on trial, several of the Gospels make it appear that Jesus didn't defend himself at all. And he truly didn't defend himself. But then there's another gospel that has a whole conversation that Jesus has with Pilate. And so as you read them, understand that all those can be true at once. All those can be true at once. And I thought about it. I thought about it in this way. If I said this morning, I'm like, hey, I want all of us to go over to the fellowship hall because I got something special for you. Well, and you're going to see this in a minute and understand what I'm saying. But if we all went over to the fellowship hall, just naturally, some of us are going to be a little bit faster than others. Some of us are going to be a little bit slower. So then if I said, hey, what was going on in the fellowship hall when you got there? Well, maybe one or two that got there first, they're going to turn the lights on. And so one or two are going to be like, well, the lights were out, we had to turn the lights on. But the rest of you get there like, well, the lights were already on when we got there. And both can be true. Both can be true, because the two of you that got there first turned the lights on. And the rest of the group got there, and the lights were already on. And so technically the lights were not on until the two got there, but also technically the lights were on once y'all got there. And both can be true at the same time. And so as we read these accounts, we have to understand that there are multiple women. There are multiple women. I believe it's in Luke. Let me just flip back there. In Luke chapter number 24, Luke 24, see here about verse 10. It was Mary Magdalene and Joanna and Mary the mother of James and other women that were with them, which told these things unto the apostles. So we have to understand that when you look in Matthew, he only mentions Mary Magdalene and the other Mary, which is Mary the mother of James the Less. In Mark, you have Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome. In Luke, I just read it, and it tells you other women. But when you read John, the only woman he mentions is Mary Magdalene. So we have to understand as we're reading these passages that even though Mary Magdalene is mentioned in every single one of them, I believe really only John gives the account of what was going on with Mary, what she saw. And so as we read Matthew and Mark, I believe Mary at the time, and so I'm going to get ahead of myself here. But anyway, I believe that Mary got to the tomb first. I believe, like I said, if you're walking in a group, which we understand, if you're walking in a group, a lot of times someone just walks faster than the others. Some people naturally walk slower than the others. A lot of times if me and my wife and them, if we go to Dollywood, my wife gets upset with me because I get ahead of them. I have to consciously slow myself down to be able to walk with my wife or walk with the group, because I'll just walk on. And so I believe that based off of John, that Mary Magdalene got to the tomb first. And we're also going to see that some of them saw angels, some of them didn't see angels. At certain times, some saw an angel, and at a different time, another one saw an angel. But the men never saw an angel. Did the men ever see an angel? As far as I know, the men didn't see an angel. They were there. They were there. And another thing I want us to think about, and actually I watched a video of a guy. He's actually out of Hampton, Georgia, and he studies plane wrecks. He studies plane wrecks, and he gives an explanation of why there are why the plane crashes happen. He'll go all over the country and go to where these plane crashes happen, and the NTSB studies, and they'll give data, but it'll be 3 years before they come out. And he'll actually give a pretty detailed explanation of what he thinks happened. And so he did this on one of his videos, and then he did it to, I don't know who the boy is. They've got the same last name. I don't know if it's his son or his grandson that he's teaching how to fly. But there apparently is some kind of video where they're like moving a ball around or something, and they tell you, they're like, all right, I want you to focus in on the ball and see who has the ball. And there are people running around. It almost looks like a basketball drill where they're kind of going in and out, in and out, in and out, and they're going back and forth. And at the end of the video, he says, "Did you see the gorilla?" And then he slows the video down, and you're like, wait a second. There is a person in a gorilla suit, and the person in the gorilla suit is jumping up and down, but you're so focused on watching the ball that you don't even notice the first time that you watch it that there's a gorilla. And so he did that, and then he showed an example of he had his like I said, son or grandson, whoever it is, and he had him looking out the left of the plane, and he wasn't paying attention to the right, to directly in front of him, and he had a video, he had an image thing that he was shooting, and he was putting a gorilla up on the front of the plane. And so when he got done, he asked the boy, he said, "Did you see the gorilla?" And he's like, "What?" And he's like, "What gorilla?" And you could see, like he would do it, and you could see it, and it was flashing on the front of the thing. But he had him so focused on what was going on over here that he didn't see that. He didn't see the gorilla. And so sometimes I think sometimes you can see something and not see it. Sometimes you can see something and not see it. You can be asked, "Hey, did you see so and so?" No, he wasn't there. Well, yeah, he was there. I saw him. I mean, even if I ask, like, who all was in Sunday school last week? If I ask each person their perspective, some of you would say, well, this person was here and this person was here, and Sister Amy was here and Paige was here, and maybe some of the ladies that sat right here. But other people wouldn't say, well, they never even noticed that Sister Amy and Paige was in here last week. They didn't even notice. So like I said, based off of perspective, based off of what you saw, you're going to say this was the account, and all of them can be true at the same time. So no, when you read them, it's not that the Gospels are conflicting. It's not that they're conflicting. It's they're just adding more details, and then it's just a matter of understanding. Back in Luke, I believe it's Luke, in Luke 24, you're going to see, and I brought this up last week, but in Luke 24, it says in verse number 40, let me read 44. And he said unto them, these are the words which I spake unto you while I was yet with you, that all things must be fulfilled which were written in the law of Moses, and in the prophets, and in the Psalms concerning me. Then he opened their understanding that they might understand the Scriptures. And so last week we talked about how that the Pharisees understood that Jesus said after 3 days I'm gonna rise again. The Pharisees understood it, and we know that directly to them that Jesus said it twice. And they may or may not have heard the other times that Jesus spoke directly to the disciples, as we've already discussed and as we've already learned, that they had people planted in there to cause issues and dispute things with Christ and everything. But Jesus told his disciples over and over, and we looked at it last week, at least 5 times the disciples would have heard Jesus say that I'm going to Jerusalem and I'm going to be betrayed and I'm going to go on trial before the priests and I'm going to be scourged and mocked and I'm going to be crucified and 3 days later I'm going to rise again. And we looked at that last week. And then we looked at in John, where in John it says as Peter and John are at the tomb in I believe it's verse number 9, it says as yet they knew not the Scripture, let me see, John 20 verse number 9, for as yet they knew not the Scripture that he must rise again from the dead. And my question last week was how? How in the world did, after Jesus plainly told them over and over and over and over again, this is exactly how it's going to happen, and not only that this is exactly how it's going to happen, but it happened exactly how it was going to happen, and you've got these disciples that their whole job was to learn from Jesus and listen to Jesus, and you would have thought at least after one thing happened and another thing happened and another thing happened and another thing happened exactly how he said, by the time you get to it's time for the 5th thing to happen, like I said last week, you would have assumed that at the tomb there would have been a whole bunch of disciples sitting there waiting for that stone to roll back and waiting for Jesus to walk out. But that's not what happened. And like I said from Luke right there, it says that then they understood the Scriptures. Then he opened their understanding so they could see it. And sometimes even us, as we read the Bible, we need God to open our understanding. If we get focused in on one thing, we get focused in on the ball, and we don't see that there's a gorilla jumping around. And like I said, if you ever see it, you'd be like, that's the craziest thing ever, because it's literally a guy in a gorilla suit jumping up and down, waving its arms. And so we have to be careful. So now we're going to look at this, and so let me just give you a couple things here. So there are multiple appearances that Jesus does. There are multiple appearances on the resurrection day, and right now we're just going to focus in on that. for this week. And so the very first appearance is going to be to Mary Magdalene. The very first appearance is going to be to Mary Magdalene, and we're going to see that in John chapter number 20, but it's also referenced in Mark chapter number 16 that Jesus appeared first to Mary Magdalene. And then in Matthew chapter number 28, which is where we're at right here, but in Matthew 28, Jesus appears to some of the women that are on their way to tell the disciples. And so another thing that we need to understand is that as they go to tell the disciples, a lot of times we think the disciples are all just in one room together. We just think they're all in one room, and eventually they're going to end up in one room. But at this point in time, they're not all in one room, because we know that when Mary Magdalene goes, she goes and she finds Peter and John, and Peter and John come to the tomb. But there are other disciples that are in other places. They're not all congregated together at this time. They are going to congregate together, but at this time, before Jesus is resurrected, or as he resurrects, they're not all together. Based off of Luke chapter number 24, and then also 1 Corinthians 15, and again, like I said, it's only in Luke that somewhere, and we never get the story. In Luke chapter number 24, let me read it real quick. In Luke chapter number 24, we're going to see that somewhere along the line that Jesus appears to Peter. In Luke chapter 24, verse 34, saying, "The Lord is risen indeed and hath appeared to Simon." And so that's also referenced in 1 Corinthians chapter number 15, verse number 5, that Jesus appeared. I believe he calls him Cephas at the time, but we know that it's Simon Peter. And so, but it's only referenced that one time. It's only referenced in the Gospels that one time in Luke, and we know based off of the story of John, and it's even mentioned in Luke that Peter goes to the tomb. But based off of John, we know that Peter, he goes to the tomb. He goes to the tomb, and he looks in, or he runs in. John is standing there looking in. Peter runs in, and he looks, and he sees, and he wonders, and he goes back to his house, and he really doesn't grasp what's going on. But somewhere between when Peter goes back to his house, and by the time the disciples have gotten together, somewhere in between there, Jesus appears to Simon. And all we know is just that one little verse, that Jesus appeared to Simon. Matthew doesn't talk about it. Mark doesn't talk about it. John doesn't talk about it. But just that one little verse in Luke, and then also referenced by Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter number 15, that he appeared to Simon. We know from the story in Luke, it's expounded pretty well, but the story of the two disciples that are on the road, and Jesus comes, and he disguises himself however he is, that he's disguised so that they don't know who he is, and they take that journey. They take that journey, and they're walking down the road, and they're walking down the road together. And honestly, obviously there are certain things when you read the Bible, when you read the Bible, you're like, man, I wish I knew more. I wish I understood more. I wish I didn't just get this little bit that they have written in the Bible. I wish I knew the whole story. And if there's one thing that I would love to have heard, or to have loved to have had written down, it would have been the words that Jesus spoke to these two, because he expounded to them the scriptures, starting from all the way back in Moses and working his way all the way up through the whole Old Testament, explaining how that Christ was supposed to come, and how he was going to suffer, and he was going to die, and how he talked to them. And I would have loved to have that sermon right there written down where you could read it. Wouldn't you, Brother Parks? Wouldn't you love to have known the things that Jesus said to them? But all we know is that they talked along the way, and then finally their eyes are open, and they realized who he is, and then they go and tell the other disciples. So he appears to them, and then he also appears to the apostles. at the end of the day, he appears to the apostles, and we know based off of John that at the first time that Jesus appears to them, that Thomas was not there. And then they told it to John, or to Thomas, and Thomas was like, unless I stick my hand, I'm not going to believe. And Jesus later rebukes him for that. So now, based off of all that, now we're going to read all the accounts. We're going to read all the accounts, and then hopefully that makes it clearer as you read them. It's less confusing, because you're like, wait a second. If Mary Magdalene saw the angels, and then why is later she so confused? If the angel said he's not here, he's risen, why is Mary Magdalene so confused in John? The reason she's so confused in John is because she didn't see the angels until after Peter and John left away, and then she looked in and saw the angels, and they didn't have the opportunity to say anything before Jesus come up behind her, and she turned around and saw Jesus. So, in Matthew chapter 28, in the end of the Sabbath, as it began to dawn towards the first day of the week, came Mary Magdalene and the other Mary to see the sepulchre. And behold, there was a great earthquake, for the angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone from the door and sat upon it. His countenance was like lightning, and his raiment was white as snow. And for fear of him, the keepers did shake and became as dead men. And so, again, let me just reference this. Matthew's the only one that references the keepers. He's the only one. Mark doesn't, Luke doesn't, and John doesn't reference the keepers. Only Matthew. But we understand from the previous verses in Matthew that Matthew was explaining something that the other ones didn't. That the Pharisees went to Pilate and said, "Hey, we know this deceiver said after 3 days I'm going to rise again, and we need to have a watch. We need to have a guard set over the tomb because they're going to come, and his disciples are going to come and steal his body and say that he resurrected." And Pilate tells him, you have a watch, go your way, make it as sure as you can. And we talked about that last week in verse 66. So they went and made the sepulchre sure, sealing the stone and setting a watch. And I said it last week, and I'll say it again. They didn't have to have any fear about the disciples, Cody. They didn't have to have any fear whatsoever about the disciples coming and taking Jesus, because they all thought it was over. They all thought he was over because they didn't understand. They didn't believe. They didn't grasp the fact that he said, after 3 days I'll rise again. And so the women were going to go to the tomb. They were going to go to the tomb, and they were going to anoint Jesus' body. But based off of Mary Magdalene's reaction, you understand that they weren't going to the tomb thinking that Jesus was going to be resurrected. She was distraught, thinking that they'd stolen the body. She was distraught, thinking someone had stolen the body and taken the body and hid the body and done something with the body. And she's like, you tell me where it's at, and I'll go take care of it. And so, but Matthew tells us that the Pharisees had this watch. So that's why he continues whenever he talks about the resurrection, he continues to tell us that there were guards there, and what happened to the guards. And actually, at the end of the chapter, which we're not going to get to today at least, but at the end of the chapter, he also describes how that the Pharisees bribed those guards that were there. They bribed them to say, "Hey, look, say that the disciples did come and steal the body. And if you get in trouble, don't worry about it. We'll smooth it over. We'll pay whatever we got to pay to make sure this gets smoothed over." And just always say this exact same thing, that his disciples came and stole the body. And so that's why you see in this passage right here that Matthew mentions about those keepers, but the other gospels don't. And for fear of him, the keepers did shake and became as dead men. And the angel said unto the women, "Fear not ye." And again, like I said, as we're understanding that these gospels are coming from the accounts of different women's perspective, you would have thought everyone would have noticed two men that were basically passed out like dead men. You'd have thought they all said, and we come up to the tomb, and the guards, and they were there, and they were flipped, and they were passed out like dead men. But it's not mentioned. And so it says, the angel said unto the women, fear not ye, for I know that ye seek Jesus which was crucified. Now again, you can read it for yourself. I really wanted to get this last week and get part of this out last week and let y'all just read it so you can kind of come up with your own mind. I don't think this was Mary Magdalene that the angel's talking to right here. I don't believe this was Mary Magdalene. Because, again, like I said, when you read the book of, when you read John, which we're going to get to, I think Mary was in the lead. She got there first, just like my thing about going to the dining hall over there. First person got there, flipped on the lights. No one else saw the lights. I think Mary got there first. I think she saw the tomb was empty, and I think she took off immediately. In my mind, a lot of times I think Mary Magdalene has a lot of the same personality that Peter has, just in female form, where she's a little bit more. I don't know if rambunctious is the word, but a little bit more. She's more willing to jump in and do things. She's more the leader. She's more pushy. And I think she got there first, and she got there, and the stone was rolled away. And I don't think she even noticed the dead men or the soldiers that looked like they were dead men. I don't think she saw the angel. I think she saw that the stone was rolled away, and she made an assumption. She made an assumption, and she took off, and she went and found John and Peter. So I don't believe that Mary Magdalene was here, even though Mary Magdalene is mentioned in all four Gospels. And like I said, I think God is honoring Mary Magdalene, and her name is mentioned, and he's honoring Mary Magdalene just like he honored her by the fact that Jesus appeared to her first. But, like I said, if you read it, you're like, well, how could Mary think this if she saw this? I think because there were other women, which is why I read each account, why there were other women, and so I think Mary Magdalene was gone. And even though Matthew only mentions he only mentions Mary Magdalene and the other Mary, we know that there are other women there. And so I believe the angel is talking to the other women. He is not here, for he is risen, as he said, come see the place where the Lord lay. And go quickly, and tell his disciples that he is risen from the dead, and behold, he goeth before you into Galilee. There shall ye see him. Lo, I have told you. And they departed quickly from the sepulchre with fear and great joy, and did run to bring his disciples word. And as they went to tell his disciples, behold, Jesus met them, saying, All hail. And they came and held him by the feet and worshipped him. Then said Jesus unto them, Be not afraid. Go tell my brethren that they go into Galilee, and there shall they see me. And I'm gonna stop reading right there. But you're gonna notice something else. If you remember, and we'll read it in a minute, but if you remember from John that when Mary sees Jesus and she says Rabboni and realizes that it is Jesus, she goes to touch Jesus, and Jesus says, No, don't touch me yet. Don't touch me yet, because I haven't ascended to my Father. But in this passage right here, so something changed, and again, a lot of stuff's going on, and it's going on pretty quick, but something changed from that moment when Jesus said, Don't touch me, until this moment, which is a different moment, different women seeing Jesus, that he allows them to fall down at his feet and touch his feet. And so again, like I said, as you read, there's a lot going on. Let's go to Mark. Let's go to the last chapter in Mark. And so in Mark, when you read in Mark, we're going to see Mark chapter 16. And when the Sabbath was passed, Mary Magdalene and Mary the mother of James, now that's what Matthew said, and Salome had bought sweet spices that they might come and anoint him. Now, again, if you remember that when Jesus Jesus died and Joseph and Nicodemus anointed the body before, Joseph brought the linen, Nicodemus brought the spices, they anointed the body, but the women were there and the women watched where they placed Jesus in the tomb, and so they started preparing those spices, and then the Sabbath day was coming up, and so they couldn't do anything on the Sabbath day, and so now we're on the first day of the week, and now the first day of the week, you have the women coming, and like I said, they're bringing their spices, and they want to anoint him. And very early in the morning, the first day of the week, they came unto the sepulchre at the rising of the sun. And they said among themselves, who shall roll us away the stone from the door of the sepulchre? Now, again, we know from Matthew that there was an earthquake, but he's the only one that mentions that there was an earthquake. And so we understand that there was an earthquake and that the stone was rolled away. And we understand from Matthew that at some point there was an angel sitting on the stone, and then both angels end up inside. But they said among themselves, who shall roll away the stone from the door of the sepulchre? And when they looked, they saw that the stone was rolled away, for it was very great. And entering into the sepulchre, they saw a young man sitting on the right side, clothed in a long white garment, and they were affrighted. And he saith unto them, be not affrighted, ye seek Jesus of Nazareth, which was crucified. He is risen, he is not here. Behold the place where they laid him. Now again, they don't mention, Mark doesn't mention that there was an angel sitting out on the stone. And depending on whose perspective, is talking right here, whose account this is, will help you understand. Just like my story, was the light on when you got over there? Well, some are going to say yes, some are going to say no. Was there an angel sitting there? Well, yes, I saw the angel. But by the time some of the other women got there, the angel was already inside, or the angels were already inside. And so it says, and he saith unto them, be not affrighted, ye seek Jesus of Nazareth, which was crucified, he is risen. He is not here, behold the place where they laid him. But go your way, tell his disciples and Peter that he goeth before you into Galilee, there ye shall see him as he said unto you. And they went out quickly and fled from the sepulchre, for they trembled and were amazed, neither said they anything to any man, for they were afraid. Now, in verse number 9, it says, now when Jesus was risen early the first day of the week, he appeared first to Mary Magdalene, of whom he had cast 7 devils. Now, that is going to make us understand that what John said is true. The Gospel of John is true that Jesus appeared to Mary Magdalene first. But we also then can understand, based off of that Mary Magdalene was not with the women that Jesus appeared to in Matthew. She was not with them. And she went and told them that had been with him, and as they mourned and wept, and when they had heard that he was alive and had been seen of her, they believed not. After that, he appeared in another form unto the 2 of them as they walked and went into the country. We know that's Cleopas and the other disciple. And they went and told it unto the residue, neither believed they them. Afterward, he appeared unto the 11 as they sat at meat, and upbraided them with their unbelief and hardness of heart, because they believed not them which had seen him after he was risen. I mean, you got to think, the first words of Christ to his disciples, the first words of Christ to his disciples was a rebuke. It was a rebuke. It was a rebuke to the 2 on the road, and it was a rebuke to his disciples. Why? Because of their unbelief. Because of their unbelief, because even after he had said to them, again, we looked at it last week in John chapter 2, destroy this temple. In Matthew chapter number 12, he says it. In Matthew chapter number 16, he says it. In Matthew 17, he says it. In Matthew 20, he says it. All those times he explains to them that he's going to go to Jerusalem, and he obviously not in John chapter number 2. It just says destroy the temple. But when he's talking to the disciples, he explains to them that he's going to Jerusalem, and that he's going to be betrayed, and then he's going to be put on trial, and he's going to be mocked, and he's going to be scourged, and he's going to be crucified. He even told them how he was going to die. He's going to be crucified. And all those things happened. And then they got to the last one, and even after he's resurrected, and people come and say, hey, Jesus resurrected, they're like, nah, didn't happen. The ones that were closest to him on earth, when the women came, they're like, nah, didn't happen. When these disciples come back, when they come back and they're like, hey, listen, you're not going to believe what just happened to us. We're walking home and we're all sad. And this guy comes up beside us and he starts talking and he starts expounding scriptures to us. And we sit down and eat. And all of a sudden we looked at him and realized, whoa, wait a second. This is Jesus. And as soon as we realized he was gone, and then and even though it was late, because if you remember, they're like, come on into the house because it's late. And they didn't care about how late it was. Once they realized it was Jesus, they went right back to Jerusalem to find the disciples. They come and say, look, this is what happened. This is how it happened. And you've already heard from the women that he's risen, and the tomb's empty. And I'm telling you, we talked to him. They're like, nah. Didn't happen. Didn't happen. And so now if you turn over to Luke chapter number 24, it says, now upon the first day of the week, very early in the morning, they came unto the sepulchre. And so we're going to find out from verse number 10 who the they is, but you don't see it right there. They came unto the sepulchre, bringing the spices which they had prepared, and certain others with them. And they found the stone rolled away from the sepulchre. And they entered in and found not the body of the Lord Jesus. And again, like I said, they're not mentioning what Matthew mentioned, that at least one of them saw an angel, and the angel talked to them outside the sepulchre. He just explains that they see the stone, that they see the stone is rolled away from the tomb, and they're going to go in. And it came to pass, as they were much perplexed thereabout, behold, two men stood by them in shining garments. So now here are the two angels. And we know that Mary's going to see two angels again. She's going to see one at the head and one at the foot. But here are two angels. And as they were afraid and bowed down their faces to the earth, they said unto them, why seek ye the living among the dead? He is not here, but is risen. Remember how he spake unto you when he was yet in Galilee. Again, that's the things that Matthew 16, Matthew 17, Matthew 20. That's the references. He's like, do you remember? You were there. You were there, and he said it. He said it, and I think Brother Wayne mentioned it in his testimony on Wednesday night, but. Brother Parks asked me about the other day, and I told him I believe it was Brother David Wells who's the one who said it. And I don't want to be like the former president of Harvard. I don't want to plagiarize something or steal someone else's statement. But he said, "Do you attend church or are you attentive in church? Do you attend a church?" All of us obviously are attending church. Everyone in here is attending. But how attentive are you while you're in church? How much are you actually paying attention? How much are you actually going to retain? If I gave out a test, if I handed out a pop quiz at the end of Sunday school and be like, hey, just write down a quick synopsis, what did I talk about today? What did I talk about? What did I talk about today? What would you write down? Again, it kind of be like these four Gospels. Some of you be like, he said this. Some of you be like, he said this. Some of you be like, he said this. And all of that may be true. But some of you be like, he said pray for Miss Totsy. I remember he said something about praying for Miss Totsy. Yeah, and I'm guilty of it. I told y'all, I mean, sometimes I'm sitting upstairs and I got security cameras sitting over here. I got the soundboard going on over here. I got the live stream going over here. I've got the camera. So if the preacher's getting up and moving around, I gotta work the camera. Which I got me a amateur sound staff going on up there now, and I got some help. So it's not as bad as it used to be. But I mean, there's a lot going on. I mean, just like if you're on the security team and you're outside, you may put it on your phone and stick it in your ear and be listening to the message while you're not getting everything. Or maybe you got a bill that's coming due on Monday, or like Cody, maybe your wife's sick, and all you're thinking about is, I hope the kids are being good. I hope this, and is my wife going to get better? And you attend, but you're not attentive. And so we're gonna see from this passage, different people see different things. Different people understand different things. Different people focus in on one thing, and then everything else going on around them, and all they know is right there. So in verse number 7, it says, saying, the Son of Man must be delivered in the hands of sinful men and be crucified, and the third day rise again. They remembered his words and returned from the sepulchre and told all these things unto the 11 and to all the rest. It was Mary Magdalene and Joanna. Again, Joanna is mentioned in no other gospel. And Mary the mother of James and other women that were with him, which told these things unto the apostles. And their words seemed to them as idle tales, and they believed them not. Then arose Peter and ran unto the sepulchre, and stooping down, he beheld the linen clothes laid by themselves, and departed, wondering himself at that which was come. Now, again, this was not Peter went a second time. Peter didn't go twice to the tomb. It wasn't all the women that came to Peter. It was one woman. It was Mary, and she came to Peter and John. And even though Luke doesn't mention it, at the same time here, Peter and John both go to it. But it's not, like I said, everything's not always mentioned. In verse number 13, behold, two of them went the same day to a village called Emmaus, which was from Jerusalem about 60 furlongs, and they talked together of these things which had happened. And it came to pass that while they communed together and reasoned, Jesus himself drew near and went with them. But their eyes were holden that they should not know him. And he said unto them, what manner of communication are these that ye have one to another as ye walk and are sad? And one of them, whose name was Cleopas, answering said, art thou only a stranger in Jerusalem, and hast not known the things which are come to pass there in these days? And he said unto them, what things? And they said unto him, by the way, Jesus has a great sense of humor, by the way, concerning Jesus of Nazareth, which was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how the chief priests and our rulers delivered him to be condemned to death and have crucified him. But we trusted that it had been he which should have redeemed Israel. And beside all this, today is the third day since these things were done. It was right on the tip of their tongue. It was right on the tip of the tongue, just like when Lazarus was going. Jesus was going to resurrect Lazarus, and it was right on the tip of Mary's tongue that all she had to do was she said she believed in the resurrection, but all she had to do was say, I believe, God, that you can resurrect him right now. And they recite everything that they know that he and then the things happen, and it's the third day, and all they had to say, it was the third day, and we expected him to rise again, but that's not what they say. Yea, and certain women also of our company made us astonished, which were early at the sepulchre. When they found not his body, they came, saying that they had seen also a vision of angels, which said that he was alive. And certain of them which were with us went to the sepulchre and found it even so as the women had said, but him they saw not. Then he said unto them, O fools, and slow of heart. Again, Jesus' first word to his disciples and first word to his apostles was to rebuke them for not believing. For not believing, for not understanding that he told them over and over. You know, it's one thing. I mean, when you were in class, you know, for I know a lot of y'all were homeschooled, but even if you did ACE, you understood if it was on the checkup, and it was on the self-test, it's gonna be on the test. So you didn't have to study the whole book. You studied the checkups and the self-test. After you got done, you're like, okay, I'm just going to study the checkups and the self-test, and I'm going to memorize what I read in the checkups and the self-test. And as long as you know what happened on the checkups and the self-test, you're going to pass the test. And over and over and over, Jesus told them boys, here it is, here it's coming. This is what's going to happen. And now it happens. They're like, I tell you what, it's the third day, and certain of our women, they came and they said they saw angels and something else. And Peter and John went to the tomb and they looked in and Jesus was gone. And we're just going home. And Jesus said, oh, fools, and slow of heart, to believe all that the prophets had spoken. Ought not Christ to have suffered these things and to enter his glory? I'm going to stop reading right there. I'm going to stop reading right there. And I'm going to, in verse 31, and their eyes were opened and they knew him. And he vanished out of their sight. And they said one to another, did not our heart burn within us while he talked with us by the way, and while he opened us the scriptures? And they rose up the same hour and returned to Jerusalem and found the 11 gathered together, and them that were with them, saying, the Lord is risen indeed. And look at this. And hath appeared to Simon. And they told what things were done in the way and how he was known of them of breaking bread. And so I'm not going to read where Jesus appears to them. We'll try and get into that next week. But in John chapter number 20, and I got to hurry, it says, the first day of the week cometh Mary Magdalene. Now, we know that it wasn't just Mary Magdalene. It was Mary, mother of James. It was Salome. It was Joanna. It was other women, what she saw. Cometh Mary Magdalene, was yet dark, unto the sepulchre, and see the stone taken away from the sepulchre. Then she runneth and cometh to Simon Peter and the other disciple whom Jesus loved, and saying to them, they have taken away the Lord out of the sepulchre, and we know not where they have laid him. And so again, she never talked to the angel, because the angel's like, hey, fear not. Whom seek ye? You seek Jesus? He's risen. She didn't have that conversation with the angel. She saw the stone rolled away, she saw the tomb, and she just took off after them. Peter therefore went forth and another disciple and came to the sepulchre, so they ran both together. And the other disciple did outrun Peter and came first to the sepulchre, and he stooping down and looking in saw the linen clothes lying, yet went he not in. Then cometh Simon Peter following him, and went into the sepulchre, and seeth the linen clothes lie, and the napkin that was about his head not lying with the linen clothes, but wrapped together in a place by itself. Then went also that other disciple which came first to the sepulchre, and he saw and believed. So John was the first of all of them, first of the men to see and believe. In verse number 9, for as yet they knew not the scripture, that he must rise again from the dead. We've already went over that. Verse number 10, then the disciples went away again unto their own home. Verse 11, but Mary stood without at the sepulchre weeping. And as she wept, she stooped down and looked into the sepulchre, and seeth two angels in white, sitting the one at the head and the other at the feet, where the body of Jesus had lain. And they say unto her, woman, why weepest thou? She saith unto him, because they have taken away my Lord, and I know not where they have laid him. So here she is. She's talking to angels. She's talking to these angels, and the other women are like, there are these white shiny garments, and it was amazing. And she just says, she sees two angels. I don't know, just two angels. And she's like, hey, they've taken away my, not, hey, y'all are white, shiny garments. There's something different about you. Tell me what happened here. No, she's still laser focused on they've taken away my Lord. Verse number 14, when she had thus said, she turned herself back and saw Jesus standing, and knew not that it was Jesus. Jesus saith unto her, woman, why weepest thou? Whom seekest thou? She, supposing him to be the gardener. Now, again, I don't know how Jesus, I don't know how he appeared, but for whatever reason, she looked at Jesus and she's like, this is the guy that takes care of the garden. We know that where Jesus was buried was in a garden, in a tomb in a garden. And so she's just like, he's the gardener. And so he'll know. He's the gardener. He'll know what happened. And so she's supposing him the gardener, her saying, sir, if you're the one that's done it, if thou hast borne him hence, tell me where thou hast laid him, and I will take him away. Jesus saith unto her, Mary. She turned herself and saith unto him, Rabboni, which say, Master. Jesus saith unto her, touch me not, for I am not yet ascended to my Father, but go to my brethren and say unto them, I ascend unto my Father and to your Father, and to my God and your God. And Mary Magdalene came and told the disciples that she had seen the Lord, And they had spoken these things unto her. So again, like I said, as you read this, and we're going to have to stop right here, but as you read this, understand that as you're reading this, even though Mary Magdalene was mentioned in every one of the Gospels, Mary's story is John chapter number 20. That's Mary's story. The other women's story, the other women's account is what's going on in Matthew and Mark and Luke. And so, thank you.